wreaked havoc as far as the economic situation across the world is concerned. Now, a latest report by the World Health Organization also talks about 500 million people that have been pushed into extreme poverty because of that. More in the following report.
As the new dangerous COVID-19 variants keep on emerging, the pandemic has already disrupted global economic order, health architecture, and exacerbated poverty, suffering, inequality, and misery. In a world marred by inequality, the pandemic triggered the worst economic crisis since the 1930s, making it even more difficult for the masses to afford healthcare. According to the World Health Organization and the World Bank, more than 500 million people worldwide were pushed into extreme poverty last year, owing to staggering health costs during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. WHO Director General Tedros Adhanom emphasized that all governments must immediately resume and accelerate efforts to ensure that every citizen of theirs can access health services without fear of the financial consequences. Underlining the gravity of the situation, the UNICEF's Executive Director Henrietta Fore noted that widespread impact of COVID-19 continues to deepen, increasing poverty, entrenching inequality, and threatening the rights of children. Hopes for sustainable gains against pandemic have been shattered by policies of developed world who continue to hoard vaccines instead of donating on large scale, whereby just 7% of people in Africa are fully vaccinated and rich countries are opting for booster shots. The new contagious variant Omicron is ripping the world, which depicts the future pandemics could be even more lethal than COVID-19. So lessons learned from the outbreak must not be squandered, and the world should ensure it's prepared for the next viral onslaught. Moreover, as the fallout from the novel coronavirus pandemic is pushing millions into unemployment and poverty, it's high time to forge bipartisan global consensus to pool the resources and rescue the humanity from precipice.
To talk about the whole range of economy that is related to the pandemic, we've been joined by Usman Chohan, who's a political economist from CASS. Usman, thank you very much to have joined us. When we talk of economy and we talk of COVID-19 or such pandemics in the same breath, how related are in your point of view are they, and how has a pandemic contributed to the economic disasters that the world has been subjugated to?
It is such a fantastic and broad-based question. Thank you for asking it. Fundamentally, pandemics are a twofold crisis. There is the public health risk, people dying, which is the lives element, but then there is the economic damage, which is the livelihoods element. Because of this, there's actually a lot of contention sometimes in governments on whether to shut down things to protect lives or keep everything open to protect all livelihoods. And most countries try to find a mean between them, but often they don't succeed because we just don't learn from history. However, Pakistan was very successful in this COVID-19 pandemic because it took a targeted lockdown, what we call smart lockdown locally approach, which closed down specific sectors but kept the overall economy going. And so we are a good example of what can be done in such difficult circumstances. Now, in terms of recovery, after, as you suggested in your question, you think of a V-shaped recovery as bouncing back quickly. Then you have a U-shaped one that is slow. But in fact, what many economists now talk about is a K-shaped recovery. So you have inequality in how things are turning out post-pandemic. Some countries or some societies or some segments of societies are doing better than others. And so inequality is a far starker element in economics post-pandemic than it was
Usman,
before.
you said some countries are doing better than others as far as their economic situation is concerned. Pakistan is of course a case in point. Nevertheless, what are the factors that have contributed to certain countries having an advantage over others?
There are some structural factors, which is good luck, your kismet, and then there are policy decisions, which are targeted decisions by governments and civil society to work together. On the structural side, Pakistan had many advantages. We have a young population, which is less affected by COVID, for example. We have a low obesity rate. We have a low urban density in that we don't have many high rises and stuff. Most of us have had the BCG vaccine, which is supposed to give you an advantage in vaccination prior to the vaccines coming out. So in 2020, that was important. And so there's many things that we had before, but then in terms of policy measures, the first important thing that I think we did, and this is coming out in a paper next year, is that we had a centralization of decision-making in the NCOC, which was civil military power and expertise driven by World Health Organization, field data from the ground, data-driven, serious scientific basis of tackling it via the NCOC down. And second is that you use your rural support program, which was actually intended for polio, and you realign this instrument to help in the rural areas to promote, good practices as well as point out the dangers to a generally illiterate population in rural areas. In addition, we put a $5 billion equivalent or 5% of GDP equivalent a GDP stimulus, which was entirely pro-poor. It was not like funding corporations like some countries have done. It really went through the previous income support program structures to help the most affected or the most disempowered in society. And there's
All right.
another, it's a very long list of good things we've done. I can keep going if you
Well,
want.
it's good to hear good things, Usman, to be very frank.
Absolutely. We deserve the credit as a country, and the
We
government has
definitely
done
do.
an outstanding job.
All right. Now, Usman, also, when we talk of 500 million people who have had to pay from their own pockets as far as their health issues are concerned, especially in the wake of the pandemic, aren't there a lot of countries in the West that have a social security system that pays for the medical bills of their citizens? Is it only the countries that do not have a stable social security apparatus or a system that have their citizens that have gone into extreme poverty?
Well, this is a very interesting point. So if you look at let's say, the four most affected countries, let's say late 2020, where things are bad and vaccines were not everywhere, the United States does not have a universal healthcare system. It's very unequal, and affordable access to medicines are a problem. So you're right. India also doesn't have it, even though they're trying to do things like Aadhaar, but it doesn't work or hasn't worked yet. However, Russia had a Soviet Union era system which was quite good. I mean, the first universal healthcare system was actually pioneered by Lenin in the early 20th century. And then Brazil, which was also devastated by this, does have what's called a Sistema Universal de Saúde, so the universal health system. And that is actually quite good for developing countries. So I don't think that universal access itself does it. A lot of other factors come into play, but it certainly helps. Pakistan doesn't have it, and yet we did very well.
All right. Now, Usman, now that we have the new variant, Omicron, whose first case has been detected by the National Institute of Health, that has been confirmed. And we are, of course, going to see more cases in the coming days, because if there's one, there must be definitely more. Uh, Omicron, everybody says, is the most virulent of the variants, and then there are going to be more. And a lot of people say that this whole spate of variants is going to continue over the next coming years. When we talk of economy and a country like Pakistan, should we go on the same pace, and should we continue to follow the SOPs? Because a lot of people say, oh, it's the end, there are going to be no more variants. A lot of people are very afraid of the coming variants. How should Pakistan move forward economically so as to balance itself out?
Yes, well, I think the stance that we have taken of moderation is the best stance. What that means is that we should not be hook, line, and sinker closing everything. And at the same time, we should never take variants lightly. From what the immediate data we're getting on Omicron, it seems like it's not so, it is very virulent, yes, but the death rates aren't as bad as you would think. And that's because many people have been vaccinated here and overseas. So perhaps we are getting around to it. There's the question of booster shots, but the science behind booster shots is not entirely confirmed, so I won't take a stance on that. But the fact is that Pakistan's moderation in terms of balancing lives and livelihoods is extremely important, because sweeping statements or sweeping measures that some countries take, like we saw in neighboring India, these are terrible for society, because not only were they extremely strict, but they also didn't prevent the virus. So they lost on both fronts, and we succeeded on both terms, lives and livelihoods.
All right. When you talk of lives and livelihood, and of course, looking at COVID-19, which shows no signs of dissipating in the near future, at least we don't know about the long future. Nevertheless, economically, in a country like Pakistan, like in other countries of this region, where there is a huge percentage that does not believe in getting itself vaccinated, and then we have to work around our economy as well. There is a low income wages. There are those who earn who are daily wages as well. What should be the mechanism that countries like Pakistan and others in the region need to follow so that their economy are not shut down in the near future?
It's an excellent question. There's a mechanism which I would argue at the national level and then a mechanism at the international level. At the national level, we should continue with this oversight and field data and selective addressal of problems through the National Coordination Cell, the NCOC, and that's fine. And we should prioritize the difference between lives and livelihoods because not having a safety net is ultimately a challenge in the sense that you do need to keep employment going. So unless it is something as benign as the common cold, it does get serious when there's something as contagious or as dangerous as respiratory viruses. So it is a serious thing. People not taking the virus seriously or thinking that this is a fiction, they are ultimately a danger to society. But in Pakistan, the advantage is that, for example, I have never heard any politician use this as currency for political votes. Never use the pandemic in an irresponsible manner. Neither have bureaucrats. And in other countries, by contrast, they do use it as currency for gaining votes and manipulating the voter base. We should never get into the politicization of these things. We should have a scientific basis. The fact that we are a predominantly illiterate society and yet we take science seriously is probably one of the greatest ironies of the 21st century. Now, at the international level, the fact that the World Health Organization should be the steward for these things, but unfortunately is not, is the tragedy, because it is a disempowered organization. In the Trump administration, they wanted to withdraw the United States from the World Health Organization. And so I think that the international mechanism where you take out the profit motive as well and just look at the science and then get everybody on board, like you did in Ebola in 2014, like you did with river blindness in the 1970s, like you did with smallpox. A lot of 21st century successes through the World Health Organization give us case studies of how it can be done. But when you have all these companies and their profits in terms of vaccines and all these other things getting involved, capitalism can be very bad when we're trying to save human lives. And this is a good example of that.
All right. Now, final question. Usman, a lot of people say, including the WHO, this is the worst crisis. They have seen economic crisis since the 1930s. Although there have been a lot of other crises and other pandemics and other epidemics that have hit the world, nevertheless, this has been the strongest hit. Is this going to change the way economies work in the future? Are we going to see a new economic world order in the years to come?
Well, this is an outstanding question, and you could spend a lot of time debating it, but here's what I would tell a general audience. Yes, the order is changing because some countries have come on top in terms of fighting the virus, and some countries have revealed that their structures are weaker than one would think. For example, pre-pandemic, you would see that the best prepared country was the United States, by all accounts, including their CDC. But in this, it was a disaster. It was a different administration, I understand, but still, as opposed to China, for example, which is the challenger power, it is the rising economic power in the world, and they managed it very well. So you do see a bit of relative shift. India is another example where everybody seemed to have, at least in the Western pundits of economics, a lot of hopes for it to succeed, but it has been an absolute disaster. Nobody seemed to be too confident on Pakistan, but then we are a resilient people, and taking a scientific basis, we did better. But in terms of, is economy changing fundamentally in the world? Well, one thing is that you and I are talking on Skype, and remote working is a big part of the culture of many organizations now. There are efficiencies that come with that. But the other thing is now globalization, which is dependent on disease. As far back as 3,000 years ago, more connectivity also creates risks in the system like pandemics. That globalization may be slowing down or even reversed, and regionalism may be a thing in terms of like working together in smaller assortments of the world for mutual success, economic success, rather than trying to expand the dogma of everybody being connected with winners and losers. So there are fundamental
winners and
changes
losers. I think, Usman, is something that we are going to see a lot of in the coming days, a lot of new winners and a lot of new losers, especially on the economic front, because of these pandemics and the way countries or societies have handled it. Thank you very much, Usman. It's always a pleasure to talk to you because you are extremely coherent and you give a detailed analysis from all the different angles. It's a pleasure to understand and to listen to you on any topic concerning the economy. Thank you very much, Usman, to have joined us. And now let's come very quickly to our last three stories. The first story is, of course, concerns the economy as well. Pakistan has beaten India, Bangladesh and the whole of South Asia as far as export growth rate for the month of November 2021 is concerned. This was tweeted by Razak Daud Saab, who's the advisor to the Prime Minister on Commerce and Investment. He said that Pakistan's exports have grown by 33.5%, which is not bad at all. In fact, it's extremely good. In November this year, as compared to the same month in the previous year, India and Bangladesh witnessed 26.5% and 31.3% growth rate. Also, earlier this month, he had revealed that the country's exports had witnessed 33% increase in November 2021 to a historic monthly high of $2.9 billion US dollars. Very good news on the economic front. Let's hope this trend continues. Next story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns India, and it concerns the open prayer ban that has been placed in Haryana by the Chief Minister M.L. Khattar, who said that Muslims should only pray in their homes or in designated places. He says that there is a row, of course, we know about with the right-wing Hindu groups that inhibited Muslims from praying at already agreed sites, and this is just a continuation of all of that. And it is also a continuation of the way India has been treating its minorities, especially the Muslims and the Christians, but particularly the Muslims. We've seen that in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. We've seen that with cow vigilantism in other parts of India, and we continue to see it now in Haryana as well. And finally, let's take you all the way to the United States of America, to Kentucky, where the death toll from tornadoes that devastated towns in that region has surpassed 100. This has been stated by the governor of the state. Democrat Andy Beshear, who's the governor of Kentucky, says that more than 80 people had been killed in the path of a tornado that was stretching at least 200 miles. He said it was the most devastating tornado event in the state's history, with at least 80 confirmed deaths. We condole with you, sir, and we condole with the US of America as far as all these deaths are concerned. When it concerns environmental tragedies, these are sometimes uncontrollable. Nevertheless, these are tragedies, and we hope that we will come out of it a stronger state. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments and stories that matter to us, you, and to Pakistan. Stay safe, get yourselves vaccinated, follow the SOPs. Allah Hafiz.